What if one NFL trade could change everything for a team? A perfectly executed trade can be the key to unlocking a team's potential, turning them into Super Bowl contenders almost overnight. But a bad trade? That can leave a team in shambles, with long-lasting consequences. We have seen teams go from bottom to top of the league off of a couple of good deals. However, today we are looking at the opposite end of the spectrum and diving into the 10 worst trades in NFL history that absolutely devastated teams. Whether it be a deal that fell flat and ruined a team's future, draft day deals that did not work out, or teams trading away future Hall of Famers, there have been some truly terrible trades made throughout the history of the league. First, Cleveland Browns trade for Deshaun Watson. So let's talk about a trade that really shook things up. Back in 2022, the Cleveland Browns were stuck in a bit of a rut with Baker Mayfield. While he's definitely found his groove with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, things weren't clicking in Cleveland. They were desperate for a game changer, a quarterback who could lead them to the promised land. So they rolled the dice and went all in on a new QB. They thought they'd found their golden ticket in Deshaun Watson. To land him, they shelled out a massive pile of draft picks. 3 first-rounders, a third-rounder, and 2 fourth-rounders. In return, they got Watson and a measly 6th-round pick. The Texans, meanwhile, transformed from rebuilding mode to contender status. With all those extra picks, they snagged top talents like Will Anderson Jr. and Tank Dell. To add insult to injury, they handed Watson a mind-boggling 5-year, $230 million, fully guaranteed contract. And get this, at the time of the trade, Watson was facing a mountain of sexual misconduct allegations. It's one of those rare cases where a team seems to have made a deal with the devil, and it hasn't paid off. Since joining the Browns 3 years ago, Watson has only played in 18 games, leading them to a mediocre 9-9 record. His stats are lackluster: 3,365 yards, 22 touchdowns, and 12 interceptions. While he's not the worst QB the Browns have had, he's certainly not living up to that massive contract. It's easy to argue that they'd be better off sticking with Mayfield and keeping all those draft picks. Second, Denver Broncos trade for Russell Wilson. Next up, we'll dive into the blockbuster trade that sent Russell Wilson packing to the Denver Broncos. At the time, the Broncos, with their new ownership group, were all in on making a big splash. They believed that with Wilson under center, they could finally contend for a Super Bowl. To make it happen, they pulled off a massive trade with the Seattle Seahawks in March 2022. The Broncos gave up a king's ransom, 5 draft picks, including 2 first-rounders, and 3 players. In return, they landed the 9-time Pro Bowl quarterback and a 4th-round pick. The Broncos' big gamble on Russell Wilson didn't pay off. Despite signing him to a massive 5-year, $242.5 million contract with a whopping $161 million guaranteed, Wilson only lasted 2 seasons in Denver. In those 2 years, he put up solid numbers: 6,594 yards, 42 touchdowns, and 19 interceptions. However, the team's record told a different story. They won just 11 of the 30 games Wilson started, leaving the Broncos with a costly mistake and a lot of questions. Third, New Orleans Saints trade for Ricky Williams. If we told you one team traded every single pick in an entire draft just for one player, that's exactly what the New Orleans Saints did in the 1999 NFL Draft. And here's the catcher: they didn't even trade up for the first overall pick. Nope, they traded all those picks just to take Ricky Williams with the 5th overall pick. The deal was wild. The Saints sent 2 first-rounders, 2 third-rounders, a 4th, a 5th, a 6th, and a 7th to the Washington Redskins, just to move up 7 spots. Sounds like a huge gamble, right? At the time, it seemed like a bold move. But here's where it all went sideways. Ricky Williams didn't turn into the generational running back everyone thought he'd be. If he had, this trade might have been remembered as a genius move. But instead, Williams lasted only 3 seasons with the Saints, and his best years didn't even come with them. Over those 3 years, he ran for 3,129 yards and 16 touchdowns. Not terrible, but not nearly enough to justify giving up an entire draft class. What was supposed to be a game-changer for the Saints ended up as one of the most questionable trades in NFL history. Fourth, Houston Texans trade DeAndre Hopkins. Next up, let's talk about one of the most jaw-dropping trades in recent NFL history. The move that sent DeAndre Hopkins from the Houston Texans to the Arizona Cardinals. After spending his first 7 seasons with the Texans, Hopkins was already considered one of the best wide receivers in the game. So when Houston decided to trade him away, it left fans and analysts scratching their heads. But what made this trade even more unbelievable wasn't just that the Texans moved on from Hopkins, it was how little they got in return. In a deal that still feels like a head-scratcher, the Texans traded D-Hop to Arizona along with a 4th-round pick. In exchange, they got running back David Johnson, a 2nd-round pick, and another 4th-round pick. At the time, it seemed like the Texans were getting next to nothing for a player who had just posted a franchise record 115 catches, 1,407 yards, and 6 touchdowns, making the Pro Bowl and earning All-Pro honors. 5th, Oakland Raiders trade for Antonio Brown. It almost feels like the Raiders are cursed when it comes to landing a true superstar at wide receiver. Recently, they had to trade away Davante Adams to the New York Jets for a conditional 3rd-round pick. But that's not the trade we're focusing on today. No, let's rewind a few years to the time they made a move to bring Antonio Brown to Oakland. The deal? The Raiders sent a 3rd and 5th-round pick to the Pittsburgh Steelers for the former Pro Bowl star. At the time, it seemed like a brilliant move. Brown was supposed to be the spark the Raiders' offense desperately needed to get back on track. But here's the twist. Antonio Brown didn't even play a single snap for Oakland. What happened? Well, after a chaotic offseason, complete with him getting frostbite from a cryotherapy session and refusing to wear a new helmet, things went from bad to worse. Brown clashed with the team and was eventually cut before the regular season even started. While the Raiders didn't give up a massive haul for the multi-time Pro Bowler, the fact that they didn't get a single regular season snap out of him and wasted valuable draft capital makes this one of the most mind-boggling and disastrous trades in NFL history. It's a perfect example of how things can go off the rails when expectations meet chaos. 6th, Chicago Bears trade up for Mitchell Trubisky. In the 2017 NFL Draft, the Chicago Bears had a player at the top of their board that they were determined not to let slip through their fingers. With the 3rd overall pick, they decided to make a bold move, trading up to the 2nd spot with the San Francisco 49ers. To secure their guy, Mitchell Trubisky, the Bears gave up a hefty price, the 3rd overall pick, 2 3rd-round selections, and 2 4th-rounders. At the time, it seemed like a calculated risk. Trubisky went on to have a solid 4 years with the Bears, even making a Pro Bowl appearance. However, the real story is what Chicago potentially passed on. Patrick Mahomes, the 2nd quarterback selected in that draft. Had the Bears waited and let another team jump up to the 2nd spot, they could have ended up with one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play the game. Instead, they traded away significant draft capital to avoid drafting Mahomes. While they couldn't have predicted his future greatness, this bold decision still lands them on the list of unforgettable draft missteps. 7th, Baltimore Colts trade. John Elway. What if we told you that John Elway was almost never a Denver Bronco? In the 1983 NFL Draft, the Colts selected him with the 1st overall pick. However, before he even played a single snap with the team, he was shipped off to the Broncos. The deal sent Elway to Denver, and in return the Colts received Chris Hinton, Mark Herman, and a 1st-round pick in the following draft. It goes without saying that anytime you give up a Hall of Fame caliber talent at the quarterback position, it's usually a bad trade. However, Elway went on to not only be a Hall of Famer, but a player who defined his generation. During his 16 years with the Broncos, he threw for 51,475 yards and 300 touchdowns. Along with this, he was a 9-time Pro Bowler, made the All-Pro 2nd team 3 times, won an MVP, a Super Bowl MVP, and was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2004. 8th, San Diego Chargers trade up for Ryan Leaf. Next up, let's talk about a draft day deal that still haunts the Chargers. Back in the 1998 NFL Draft, the Chargers had the 3rd overall pick, but they were so desperate to move up to number 2 and select Ryan Leaf that they gave up a massive haul. Their 3rd-round pick, a 2nd-round pick, and 2 talented players, Eric Metcalf and Patrick Sapp. At the time, it didn't seem like such a bad deal. Leaf's time in San Diego was a disaster. He spent a season sidelined with an injury, and in the 21 games he did play, he threw for 3,172 yards, 13 touchdowns, and a whopping 33 interceptions. The Chargers went a dismal 4-14 with him as their quarterback. Drafting a bust is bad enough, but giving up so much to get one? That's a trade that will forever be remembered as one of the worst in NFL history. 9th, Atlanta Falcons trade. Brett Favre. The Green Bay Packers pulled off one of the greatest steals in NFL history when they traded for Brett Favre in the offseason following the 1991 season. After a rookie year spent backing up Chris Miller, the Packers shocked everyone by trading a first-round pick to the Atlanta Falcons for Favre. Initially, it seemed like the Falcons had gotten the better end of the deal. However, Favre quickly proved them wrong, becoming one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. He spent 16 incredible seasons in Green Bay, leading the team to a Super Bowl victory and setting numerous records. Favre threw for a staggering 61,655 yards and 442 touchdowns, earning 9 Pro Bowl selections, 3 first-team All-Pro honors, 3 MVP awards, and an Offensive Player of the Year award. 10th, Tampa Bay Buccaneers trade. Steve Young. The last spot on this list goes to a team that definitely let a generational talent slip away too soon. Enter Steve Young. In his first 21 games, Young's stats were far from impressive. A 63.1 passer rating, 3,217 yards, 11 touchdowns, and 21 interceptions. Ugly, right? But the San Francisco 49ers saw something special in him, so they sent a second and a fourth-round pick to the Bucs to bring him in as a backup. And man, were they right. Learning from Joe Montana was exactly what Young needed to turn his career around. By the time he took over, he was an entirely different player. Fast forward to his time with the 49ers, and Young posted an insane passer throwing for nearly 29,907 yards, 221 touchdowns, and just 86 interceptions over 150 games. He made 7 Pro Bowls, was named first-team All-Pro 3 times, landed on the second-team All-Pro 3 times, and even snagged 3 Super Bowls, 1 Super Bowl MVP, an Offensive Player of the Year award, and a Hall of Fame induction in 2005. That's an incredible legacy for a guy who had a rough start. It's tough to say if Young would have reached that level with the Buccaneers, but given what he went on to accomplish, this trade has to be one of the worst moves in NFL history for Tampa Bay. And there you have it, 10 of the absolute worst trades in NFL history, each one leaving behind a legacy of regret for the teams involved. Whether it's a quarterback disaster, a draft blunder, or trading away future Hall of Famers, these deals have certainly reshaped the NFL landscape in ways that no one could have predicted. What do you think? Were there any trades you feel should have made the list? Or maybe you think one of these deals wasn't as bad as it seems. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss out on more NFL breakdowns, debates, and insider content. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.